Hey y'all, this is Amanda and welcome back to my Texas Zone 8A garden. And since it's January and we're all beginning to plan, I want to show you all how I go about my seed storage solutions and prepping my garden calendar for the whole year. Okay, so let's talk seed storage solutions. Pretty simple. I'm not going to go into super depth with this because this is something that a lot of people do. I purchased the containers that hold the 4x6 photos. And you can get these containers in all clear, rainbow. They also come in aqua and lavender. And I have them all linked to my Amazon storefront. And I'll drop that link below in the description if you guys want to check it out. So basically, you're just looking at a 4x6 container. And it just holds all my seeds in there. Sorry, Buffy. Buffy's walking around over here. So it holds all my seeds in there, and then I use a label maker to go ahead and print out the labels. This year, my seeds, I spent time dividing them all up. I divided them all up by individual varieties. So all my cosmos together, all my asters, all my bachelor buttons, all that kind of stuff. And then I had everything in alphabetical order. Now I do have some negative spaces missing in these, and that's because those particular seeds are in the freezer being prepped, going through cold stratification before I start sowing them. But that's basically how I do my seeds. I put all of my all of my flower seeds into these three. So these three are all flower seeds right here. And then my vegetable and herbs have their own container. I don't grow as many vegetable and herbs, but I went ahead and put them in their own container. I thought that was way easier. Now, I don't get super fancy with my labeling system. I have a label maker that's literally 15 years old, and I just keep using that. It doesn't have any fancy fonts or anything like that, but it works just fine for what I need. You can also hand write just fine. I've seen a lot of people actually take a Post-it note. Let me grab a Post-it note real quick. So actually take the Post-it note and you can put the Post-it note on the inside and write on it. So you put the sticky part to the inside and you write on it, and then you have it like that as well. So then nothing's permanent. You can change it out every year if you wish, which I think kind of works really nice too. I will say when I was alphabetizing everything this year, there's a lot of flowers that start with C and there's a lot of flowers that start with S. But other than that, I just store these in, temperature controlled space away from light, and it works really, really well for me. I like to lay all these out across the table when I'm working with them, pull out what I need. It's worked really well. I'll probably continue to build on this system. I know this takes up a lot of room, but this is what works best visually for me, because if I can't visually see them, I'm going to forget that I have them, and I'll end up buying all the seeds again. It'll be costing me more money. So this is what works really well for me. I highly suggest before you jump in and start buying a ton of seeds that you take the time, go through the seeds that you have, and make a list of what you do and do not need. Okay, so there's some simple seed storage, but what I want to jump into with you all is talk about my garden calendar. Now, last year, and I'll drop the video below, you might remember me starting my garden calendar. I work with a wall hanging calendar, and I utilize Post-it notes to record what I need to do on what days. I also record my video scheduling on here as well. But yeah, it worked really, really well for me throughout the year. It allowed me to pick up different ones because this is easy to move around and move it to different places instead of writing directly on the calendar. When you write something directly on the calendar and then you don't actually get to it, there's some guilt involved. And so the Post-it situation is just so much easier and so much simpler for me. And it works really well visually, and also for the type of person I am. I love to be organized, but I'm not hyper organized, if that makes sense. I do use an online calendar format for my family. I didn't want to do that same thing with gardening. I guess there's just something nice about it that it's not so digital. Gardening, that I'm very hands-on, so I felt really compelled to have a hands-on calendar. So this is my calendar from last year, and like I said, I'll drop the link below so you can hear how my experience went with that. let's talk about some changes that I've made for this year on my calendar. So I selected the Glorious Garden Calendar. This is off of Amazon, and this is on my Amazon storefront if you're interested. But basically, a couple of things I did different this year, and I'm not that far into January as of yet. But basically, you can see over here that I've labeled week 11, week 10, 9, 8, 7. So basically, what I did to start off before I put anything else on my calendar is I went to the Farmer's Almanac and I looked up the last frost date for my particular area, which happens to be March 18th. And I am zone 8A in North Texas. So I went ahead and marked my last frost date. The reason I did that is because I'm doing a lot of seed starting this time of year. And seed starting is based on your last frost date. So while some of y'all who are in my zone, you're like, oh, this is great, I'll just follow along and do whatever she is. I might have some of you guys who are in zone 9 and your frost date is earlier in March or in February. Or some of you guys who are in zone 7, 6, and yours are going to be a little bit later into April. And so it's a little bit harder for you to decide, okay, when I need to sow these things. So I thought by starting with my last frost date and then counting back week 1, 2, 3, and I counted backwards. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and when I had repeated days, I went ahead and put that week again on there. 8, 9, 10, 11. So I know that the first week of January is 11 weeks out from my last frost date. So it allows me to know, hey, I'm 11 weeks out. I know that this week I can seed indoors, and I've got on here stock, snapdragon status, strawflower, dianthus, feverfew, and scabiosa, and then also sweet peas, delphinium, and lettuce. And so those are things that I'm going to be starting at the end of this week, and you'll see the video for that next week. But it'll be easier for you all to follow along if instead of being like, hey, this week I'm doing this, I'm going to be specific and say, hey, I'm 5 weeks out and I'm starting this. I'm 6 weeks out from my last frost date and I'm starting this. I'm 8 weeks out from my last frost date and I'm starting this. I think that'll be easier to bridge multiple hardiness zones instead of just doing everything focused on 8A. It'll just be a little bit more general and easier for if you're a different different hardiness zone to know what you need to be doing in regards to your last frost date. Now, the last frost date is probably the most important thing you can know at this time of the year for your area. So definitely look that up. You can just go online, you can Google last frost date. It'll take you to a website and you can calculate the whole thing from there based on your zip code. You can also just go straight to Farmer's Almanac and look it up that way. That being said, so the next thing I like to do is I like to take my Post-it notes. I like to cut the corners of them off with a pair of scissors, and then they allows me to stick them in place wherever I need them, and I can stick and move them to different places if I don't have time to end up doing things that particular week. It makes life a lot easier. I've gone ahead and gone in, and I know that I need to start, the particular seeds for this first week in January. I know that next week, by the end of next week, I want to go ahead and start my indoor violas and pansies. I know that I need to get my onion starts in by mid-January. So I've gone ahead and I've put some general things in here that I know that I need to follow along with my garden. And you can do the same thing. Starting pretty much a couple of weeks out from my last frost, I'm probably going to want to do a general fertilizing all the way in this area. Go through, spread, a granulated fertilizer throughout my entire garden. That's a good time of year to do something like that. You can also go in and be like, hey, I have spring break. So this whole week right here is spring break with my family and I'm going to be away. So now I know I'm not going to plan for anything at that point in time. So this just allows you to have, some variety and move things around using the Post-it system so that you don't feel guilt about, hey, I didn't get that done or whatever. Now, gardening, you can definitely give or take a few weeks. It's not the end of the world. I mean, I'm not going to be starting, violas and pansies in June. I'll probably, if I'm starting them for the fall, I'm going to be, look at my first frost date in the fall, but generally there's some movement between them. So just because I'm starting something this week doesn't mean like if you don't start it this week, it's over. You don't have a chance. There's still some flexibility in there. So definitely take everything with a grain of salt, some flexibility for your particular area and your particular garden. So last year I did a lot of color coding. Anything that was orange was seeds I needed to sow. Anything that was purple were things things I needed to plant, all the pink were videos I was making, and then I had just general chores I needed to take care of. I did not color code this year. I did not feel like it made that big of a difference visually for myself, and I do think it got a little tedious regarding that because a lot of things can be back and forth of whether it's one category or the other. So I just picked, you know, the nice peach. I went for peach this time. The nice peach Post-it note. I like the color. It wasn't so striking and vibrant. It was a little bit softer. I'm also not utilizing Sharpies on my Post-it this year, and that's what I did last year. Instead, I have a very fine point pen so I can write more detailed things on each of the days. I also find that having my calendar out when I'm watching other YouTube gardeners, when I'm on social media, something along those lines, and I'm listening to what other people have to say, I love having my calendar out because I can jot down a note or an idea or a thought, and instead of putting it directly on the calendar, I can go ahead and put it up at the top, knowing that it's something that I want to accomplish that particular month, and then it's easy just to pull it down whenever I need it and put it in place. So that's a really nice way to approach like, hey, I still need to take care of these things. You know, maybe I didn't have time for it this month, so I'll go ahead and move it to the next month. But it's an easy way to kind of keep track of all the tasks that you have without writing them down permanently on the calendar. Okay, so today's video is not a terribly long video, but I just wanted to throw this out there so that you guys could see the methods that I utilize in my garden and I utilize in my life for organization for my garden. Now, this does not mean that this is going to work for everybody, but maybe this really, you know, resonates with one of y'all and this is something you're interested in doing. I love a traditional wall calendar. I love having it up. I love looking at the beautiful photos, seeing what everybody else is doing in their own gardens. I like having control, and I'm really excited about having the note of how many weeks until my last frost. I think that's going to be very helpful as I continue planning. All right, you guys, if you have a tried and true method that you really believe in, whether for seed storage or for a garden calendar, organizing for your calendar, describe it below. Let me know. Send me a link if it's something to a particular video or method that you particularly like. I'm very interested. I'm very interested to continue to learn. I think that, you know, this calendar method will evolve year after year as I learn more and find out what works best for my system. I know a lot of people do everything on the computer and they'll put, they'll do spreadsheets and all kinds of stuff. I am a smaller gardener. I don't garden on a massive scale, and so I think this works for me. My old job used to be on a computer 24/7, so immediately jumping on a computer and spending a lot of time there and putting a lot of my gardening dreams into a computer really goes against the grain of how I'm wanting to move on with my gardening career. However, those of you who are really organized and you love the computer and you love how easily it adds everything up, it might work brilliantly for you. I've created enough Excel worksheets in my life that I'm really cool not doing that for a lot more years. It's not something I'm super excited about doing. It's not something I feel comfortable joining with my gardening world, but that's me. That doesn't mean that's you. But go ahead and let me know what methods work really well for you. I'm always interested to hear what you say. I've only been gardening for a little over 5 years, right? I mean, some of my favorite people that I've met on YouTube, they have been gardening for decades, and some of them have it all in their head, which I'm like, that's amazing that you do that. Some people write it down. Some people have a gardening journal. Everybody's different. So I'm always interested to hear what you're doing at home for your garden. Okay, that's enough chatting for today. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video going over how I do my seed storage and how I set up my garden calendar for the year. As always, she's a mad gardener or decorator or anything else that she wants to be. Thanks, y'all. I just love these. This is my secret garden from last year. I didn't get the secret garden this year. I got the glorious garden this year. So this is the one that's linked in my Amazon store. I also linked the Post-it notes and the seed organizers. All of that's on there for you guys to check out, see if it's something you're interested. I even linked my clickable Sharpies that I absolutely love as well. That's all on there. It's in the video below to check it out.